Good morning, students. Welcome to Investigation 3 2/10. You should be on page 64. Today we're going to be talking about connecting cereal shelf location and sugar content, describing variability. Remember, that's how close or how far apart data is, using the IQR. Remember, IQR stands for interquartile range. Cereal boxes have nutritional information on the side panel. Sugar content is reported in grams per serving. Okay? So if we look at what's highlighted here in blue, it says whatever this cereal is has 6 grams of sugar per serving, per meaning unit rate, and each serving is 3/4 of a cup. Okay, let's continue. The dot plot below shows the distribution of grams of sugar per serving for 70 cereals. The median is 7 5/10 grams of sugar, or about 2 teaspoons of sugar per serving. The red marker, looks like an upside down T, indicates the median. So the median is right here, okay? Again, these are all ordered, and if we were to cross off the largest value and the smallest value and so on and so forth, there'd be a 7 and an 8 in the middle. The median would be 7 5/10. What surprises you about the data set or its distribution? Anything? What questions do you have as you look at the distribution? Well, I'm going to go ahead and guess a lot of our healthier cereals, right, are going to be found in this side. A lot of the sweeter cereals, maybe like Cookie Crisp or Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch, are probably going to be located over here, right? They're super, super sweet, have a lot of high sugar content. Let's continue. It says, you have used measures of variability, range, and interquartile range, IQR. In problem 3 2/10, you will use the interquartile range to describe variability in grams of sugar for different groups of cereal. Now, we're going to talk about part A, but we're not going to write anything down because they want you guys to have a copy of some of this information for you to mark on, and we don't have that, but let's just talk about it quickly. It says use the dot plot on the previous page, right? They're talking about this here, showing the distribution of sugar in cereals. Are there intervals where the data cluster? What does this tell you about the data? So take a look again at this dot plot. Just think to yourself and answer these questions in your brain. Are there intervals where the data cluster? What does this tell you about the data? So think about that. Well, I would say there are definitely some areas where the data starts to cluster. So first of all, 3 and 6, right? Those seem to be pretty popular as far as a number of grams per serving. But really between kind of 0 and 3 and 5 to, I'd say about 12 is where we see a lot of clustering. But I would say overall the variability is pretty high, right? It's spread out all the way between 0 to 15. That's a pretty high range of sugar content, okay? Now, number 2 we're going to skip, but basically they wanted you to locate where these cereals are on here. So basically bran full, boy, that sounds healthy, doesn't it? Has 5 grams of sugar. So they wanted to say, well, where is it located, right? It would be one of these dots above the 5, right? Because there's 5 grams of sugar there. It's going to talk about where it's located on shelves at a store, which is what we're going to talk about next. But obviously, crispy bran has got 6 grams of sugar, right? So it's going to be one of these dots and so on and so forth. But we're going to go ahead and skip that. And we're going to start on part B. Now, part A talked about the number of grams of sugar. And this here is going to break down where are these sugary cereals on shelves. Some of them are on the top shelf. Some of the sugar cereals are on the middle shelf. And some of them are on the bottom shelf. And we're going to look for patterns here. So B says the dot plots below show data for the 70 cereals organized by supermarket shelf location. Again, top shelf, middle shelf, bottom shelf. All right? So let's start by looking at B number 1. All right, so I've got my notebook, I'm ready. B number 1 says, is there any pattern to how sugary cereal, let me try that again. Is there any pattern to how sugary a cereal is in its shelf location? Find ways to describe and compare the 3 distributions of data. So We'll do the first one together. We're going to look at top shelf. Let's focus on this dot plot right now. Again, is there any pattern to how sugary a cereal is and its shelf location? So, if somebody were to ask you, how would you describe the sugar content of cereals on the top shelf, what would you say? So right now, I want you to write down B number 1. I want you to write the words top shelf, and I want you to look at this distribution of data. How would you describe the types of cereals on the top shelf? Write maybe 1 or 2 complete sentences. So go ahead and press the pause button, take a look at the information, answer this question, and unpause when you're finished. Okay, well, I would say for the cereals on the top shelf, the cereals have a large spread, right? That's variability, because the range is 11 grams of sugar. Right, well, how did I get that? Well, the highest amount of sugar content is 11, and I have some cereals that have no sugar content at all. So I can have options with high sugar or no sugar. That's a huge spread, isn't it? But overall, if I'm looking, I would say the data does cluster from 0 to 3 grams of sugar. In other words, if I'm looking at this, I'm noticing that most of the cereals are going to be between 0 and 3 grams of sugar per serving. So what does that tell me? That tells me that most cereals on the top shelf are healthy, right? If I'm a healthy eater, I'm probably going to select cereal that's on the top shelf because most of the cereals there are clustered between the 0 to 3 grams of sugar per serving clusters. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to have you guys do right now, right? Number 2, middle shelf. Maybe skip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Write down number 3 and write bottom shelf. I want you to do exactly what I just did. I want you to look at the data set. Is it spread out? Talking about variability. Does it cluster anywhere, right? I use the word cluster, the word variability, and overall, what kind of cereals am I going to find on those shelves? So why don't you hit the pause button right now and maybe write 1 or 2 sentences about what you notice about the variability or cluster of the data points on the middle and bottom shelves of cereal. Okay, now we are going to move on to 2A and B. So hopefully you guys have all your answers here. So I'm going to write 2A. Now I'm going to show you how to do this for the top shelf again, and you got to do the middle and bottom shelves yourself. It says find the IQR for each distribution. Now remember, interquartile range, that's the middle 50%. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to write my numbers in order from least to greatest. So for 2A, I'm going to write down, I'm going to translate all these dots in the dot plots to numbers. So I've got 4 dots under 0. So that means I'm going to have a 0, 0, 0, 0. Right? There's 4 cereals with 0 grams of sugar. Then I've got a cereal with 1. Then I've got 2 2s. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3s. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm writing 5s instead of 3s. So sorry. I have 5 3s and I was writing 5. So 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Again, I've got 5 3s. That's where that came from. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3s. Then I've got 3 6s. So I'm going to go 6, 6, 6. Then I've got 2 10s. So I've got a 10 and a 10. Then I've got 3 11s. Okay? Now, I've got to separate these into quartiles, right? Into fourths. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 values. So if I'm going to divide 20 values into sections of 4, how many will be in each? Well, 20 divided by 4 is 5. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's quartile 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's quartile 2. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's quartile 3. So I've got 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. Well, quartile 1, class, what's between 1 and 2? I probably don't need to do a whole lot of math for that one. The number between 1 and 2 is 1 5/10. So I've got 1 5/10 here. Notice, guys, that the median is going to be 3, right? Because since both my middle numbers are the same number, my median is going to be 3. And what about quartile 3? What's it between 6 and 10? Well, that number is 8, right? 6 plus 10 is 16 divided by 2 is 8. So remember, let me move my camera. To find the IQR, I take the third quartile number and I subtract the lower quartile number, which is here. So I'm going to do 8 minus 1 5/10. So go ahead and do this math problem and see if you get the same interquartile range that I get. Okay, let's see how well you did. I can't take 5 away from 0. Hopefully nobody made that mistake. So I have to add a decimal point and a 0. I borrow from the 8, make it a 7. I make the 0 a 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. 7 minus 1 is 6. So the interquartile range for the top shelf is 6 5/10 grams of sugar. So the middle 50% of cereal on the top shelf will have a difference of 6 5/10 grams of sugar. So again, if we go back to page 66, you're going to do this same exact process, what I just did for the top shelf, for both the middle shelves and the bottom shelf. You're going to translate these dots into numbers, divide them into the quartiles, subtract the upper quartile and the lower quartile, and you're going to compare your interquartile ranges for all 3 shelves and tell me which one is the most variable, which one is the least variable. Remember, most variable means which ones are spread apart the most. Least variable are the ones that are clustered or closer together. And then, once you're done with that, number 3, you'll write a report talking about what you noticed about the information on the sugar content on the 3 shelves for cereals, okay? All right, guys, good luck. Again, I know these are very, very challenging investigations, but you guys all have growth mindsets. You guys got this. Good luck, guys. Have a great day of learning. I'll see you guys tomorrow.